Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to this presentation about aging. With an increase in older individuals, it's important to gain an understanding of aging. Is it just a number? And what do you need to know about aging? My name is Tiffany Works, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Our objectives for this presentation are that we will be able to define age and aging. We'll learn the difference between age and aging. We will be able to identify normal and abnormal signs of aging. We will identify aging trends and perceptions, and we will gain knowledge about the 5 types of aging. And I also intend to help prompt social workers to develop and apply a practical approach to aging. Age versus aging. Age is just a number, and it is a subjective feeling. Aging is scientifically described and defined, and aging is observable. Age and aging are not the same, obviously. It is thought that the process of aging begins at about the age of 20 years old. Who knew? I guess I've been aging for a while now. There's no answer as to what is quote unquote old because it is subjective. And later in the presentation, we will gain a better understanding of what I mean by this. Many things contribute to age, and with the increase in the average life expectancy, I've read while doing research for this presentation that there are people upwards of 120 years old living. As social workers, because of the increase of the average life expectancy, we should be prepared and understand the difference between age and aging so that we can develop a practical approach to working with this population. Because obviously, if there are more older individuals, then we're sure to work with them at some point in our career. Factors that contribute to age include genetics, lifestyle, and environmental factors. The definition of age is an individual's development measured in terms of years requisite for like development of an average individual. So basically what this means is how old you are and where you are from birth to the day where you are right now. So if you are 50 years old, and that is your age. Some people like to look at age differently, but this is the true definition of age. And we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by people look at age differently when we get a little further into the presentation. The definition of aging is being of advanced years and especially past middle age. Now, no one told me what the definition of middle age is, but we'll go with, I don't know, 50 maybe, especially since the average life expectancy is increasing. That's just a guess for me. But the definition of aging, in contrast, aging is being up into the older years and the process of becoming that age. So when we look at age, it is just a number, but aging is the process of becoming that number, of becoming that age. What is normal aging? When we look at normal aging, we want to look at 3 primary areas. We want to look at the physical, the cognitive, and psychosocial areas of an individual. The physical signs of aging. This is what most would attribute age to. It's what we see. These are the physical things, the physical signs that we can see through the process of aging. And I've listed here some examples of the physical signs of aging. Eyesight is something that definitely becomes more difficult as we age. So we have deficits in the actual physical lens of our eyes. Our peripheral vision, so being able to see, if you're looking straight, being able to see to the side of you. And then of course, night vision changes. I know for me, driving at night, becomes more difficult as time goes by. Hearing, this is also something that we can attribute to aging, because as we get older, things just like with a car start wearing out. They don't work quite as well as they used to. So some of the things regarding hearing are tones and frequency, and distinguishing between changes in tones of speech. So tones, I've noticed in my experience when working with the older generation that if I change the tone of my voice to a more monotone voice, and I'm not changing from a higher pitch down to a lower pitch, that they are able to understand me better. So when I'm talking to someone who has difficulty hearing, I want to be a little bit closer to them. I want to be facing them, and I want to be able to keep my tone of voice at a rather monotone or a monotone tone. Our hair, of course, the gray hair, the silver hair, white hair, is definitely a physical sign of aging. And then, of course, the density. So as we grow older, our hair starts thinning out. Our skin, this is something that many people, I don't know, people that are vain want to change. Also with the hair color as well. A lot of people dye their hair, and that's perfectly okay. We'll talk a little bit about that a little further into the presentation. But skin, the ability for our skin to heal becomes more difficult. Our skin doesn't grow back as well as it used to. I'm sure many of you, if you work with elderly or the older population, you can see that if they bump themselves, they get a bruise or what we call a skin tear. And those don't dry, or those don't grow back as easily. We're not healing as well as we used to. And then, of course, dryness and wrinkles. So the wrinkles and the dryness come from not producing collagen as well as we used to. Collagen production starts well before we become up into age. Like I said earlier, the process of aging is thought to begin at 20. Our muscles and bones as we age become a little more fragile. So this is why a lot of people are very cautious with the older population when they're walking or living alone. We often hear of people falling. Maybe perhaps they think they're able to get out and do more than they can in their yard, at home. They want to remain as independent as possible. And when they're doing this is when maybe they're falling. They're not as careful as they should be. They're falling, and whereas you or I, when we may fall, we may not break a hip, but someone that is up in age may have more fragile bones and may actually be more prone to breaking those bones. And of course, we know that muscles are attached to our bones. And so when our muscles, the muscle mass, our muscles start having atrophy or becoming not as dense or strong as they used to be. And so that also contributes to the fragility of our bones. And then, of course, weight. Weight fluctuates. And the reason that weight fluctuates when we're older has to do a lot with hormonal imbalances and also our metabolism. Again, referencing a car or something that we use on a daily basis, things just tend to wear out a little bit more with age. The more we use it, the older that it gets, the less functional it becomes. Something else to consider regarding weight is oftentimes when we get older, we don't use as much energy as we do when we're younger. And so we don't require as many calories. And then oftentimes our appetite tends to decrease. Also, when you don't have a house full of people any longer in the home, you're not preparing meals like you used to when you had when they had their children at home or a loved one there with them. Oftentimes they're living by themselves. And I don't know about you, I think it's difficult to cook when you live by yourself. The heart and arteries, the efficiency, the ability to work as it used to. The heart is a muscle, and as we were talked about earlier, you know, the muscles, the mass of the muscles. And again, you know, when something, you know, is constantly used, then the efficiency and the effectiveness of it is not going to be what it used to be. And then plaque is something that just normally happens in the arteries of our bloodstream, of our heart and bloodstream. This is just something that's going to happen as we get older. We're going to build that plaque, and plaque definitely is kind of like I don't know, let's just say like a piece of plastic or something that gets caught inside of an artery. And if something gets caught, if you look at an artery like it's a pipe and a piece of plastic gets in that pipe, then water as it goes to that pipe is not going to be able to flow as freely as it would if the plaque weren't there or the plastic wasn't there. So plaque inside of an artery is not going to allow your blood to flow as freely as it would if it weren't there. The cognitive signs of aging. I'm very passionate about the cognitive signs of aging. I've actually done a presentation on dementia, and so I could really talk on and on and on about the cognitive signs of aging. But what I really want to focus on here is what is normal and what is abnormal. Changes in the brain and sleep are two of the biggest signs that we see with aging. And despite the growing number of individuals with a type of dementia, actually dementia is not a normal part of aging. Forgetfulness, some short-term memory, and recall can all certainly be expected due to the physical changes that occur in the brain as we age. How many of you walked into a room and wondered why you walked into the room or forgot why you walked into the room? I would be raising my hand right now for sure. So that is normal. That is a normal part of aging. Sometimes that really may not even have anything to do with aging. Sometimes it may have to do with stress. Sometimes it may have to do with, I don't know, maybe you haven't been on a routine or a schedule and things just aren't flowing like they usually do. And oftentimes as we get older, we retire. And when we retire, our schedules change. We're not going at 90 miles an hour and having to keep up with so much all the time. You know, our minds are able to relax a little bit. And because maybe we're able to relax a little bit, that focus may change, and being able to remember or recall while we walked into a room may become more difficult. But normal signs of aging is that the size of the neural networks of the brain are going to change. They're actually going to become smaller. They're going to shrink in size. And this may contribute or be attributed to why we forget why we walked into a room, or why we can't remember all of the birthdays, or why we can't remember what day it is. You know, unless we have a calendar in front of us, we're not at work and writing the date every day or looking at our calendar every day to see what we have to do every day. The blood flow in the brain absolutely changes. Remember when we talked about the arteries? Well, those arteries definitely pump blood into the brain. And as we get older, the plaque is there, and so the blood flow does decrease. Our brain weight. So as we get older, things tend to shrink, and the brain is one of those things that tends to shrink. And then, of course, memory. I talked about forgetfulness and recall, those sorts of things. Some of those minor memory issues are considered to be normal. Sleep is a big thing. Our circadian rhythms change. And what I mean by circadian rhythms is the sleep and wake patterns, the patterns of sleep that we go through. Again, our body is just not functioning like it used to because of the wear and the tear that we have done on our bodies. Sometimes as we age, we may need more sleep. But also, as we age, we may not need as much sleep because we may not be exerting as much energy throughout the day and require more sleep. So the change in our awake and sleep hours may differ. When we are working age, when we are at an age to where we have a career, we have to get up at a certain time every day to get ready. When we were raising children, we had to get up at a certain time. We needed to go to bed at a certain time because we had to be up at a certain time the next morning. So we were on a schedule. And as we get older, sometimes there's just not a need for a schedule. These are all very normal parts, normal cognitive signs of aging. Now, the abnormal part, and this is where I've done another presentation, Dementia, the book and its chapters, when we talk about abnormal cognitive changes. The brain, dementia, and depression are absolutely not normal. So if someone says, "Oh, they're just getting older," it's dementia. It's fine. It's normal. Everybody gets dementia. And despite the increase of individuals that have dementia, it still remains not a normal part of the aging process. And then depression, it is absolutely not normal. Depression at any time in your life is not normal. So why would it be normal as we get older? I mean, obviously, some things change as you get older. There are many things that contribute to our mood when we get older, and we may be a little bit more sensitive to those things that contribute to our mood. However, being depressed, sad is different. Sad is a symptom of depression, but depression is just absolutely abnormal for aging. Sleep, insomnia, staying awake, again, that has to do with not exerting as much energy, their circadian rhythms being changed, not having something to wake up for. Maybe we, as we get older, we don't have something to wake up for tomorrow, so we're going to stay up a little bit later. We may not be able to sleep because we're just not on a schedule. We're not on a routine. And so that definitely makes a difference. And onto the psychosocial signs or the psychosocial elements of aging. When we look at the psychosocial aspects of an individual, we must take into consideration the things that change as one gets older. And we look at a couple of different areas that change as we get older. As one gets older, the sexual drive changes due to hormones and or other medical conditions. Now, we all know that sometimes libido doesn't go with age. You don't lose a libido because of age. You lose a libido or a desire because of a medical condition. So the sexual part of an individual may have something to do with that. It has to do with something totally different. The desire may still be there, but there may be a medical condition or a lack of a partner that doesn't allow someone up in age to be able to experience sexual pleasure. The social aspect of aging. So when we look at this, we really want to focus on what happens as we get older. As we get older, death of family members, death of friends. I can remember my grandmother being in her late 70s and talking about her brothers and sisters that had gone on before her. She had lost her children, and I remember her talking about that and how I just remember how lonely she sounded. I remember her expressing this and talking about it as a way of letting us know that that made her feel isolated. So being isolated, her loved ones weren't here anymore. And then, of course, she had outlived many of her friends as well. So the circle of friends that she once had, she used to go square dancing. She used to go out and eat dinner. There were things that she used to enjoy with her friends and family members. And because they are no longer here, she wasn't able to do that anymore. And then, of course, lack of activities. Lack of activities, one, because of physical inability to do those physical activities that they once did, but also not maybe because of eyesight or hearing or some other physical condition, they're not able to drive, or there's just not activities where they live. If people live in a rural community, getting involved with the social circle or friends or other activities is very difficult to do. It requires transportation. It requires that there be somewhere to go to. So that's something very important to think about when we're talking about aging individuals, just the lack of activities. They can't get out and do some of the things that they used to. So as social workers, I would love to encourage you to really be thinking about what are some activities that we could do? What are some activities that we could modify so that those that are aging can continue to have a social element of their aging process? Now we go into spiritual. Spiritual, is something that's very important to many people. And when I talk about spiritual, maybe transportation is a reason that they can't get to church or whatever it spiritual is to them. If it's, meditation or, like I said, going to church, how are they going to get there? Are they able to watch church at home, which I know now that has become quite the norm for many people, being able to watch church at home and not having to drive somewhere. Oftentimes, many individuals that are aging have had to leave their home, and so they're no longer close to the church family or the area where they practice the spiritual part of their life. They're not close there anymore, and they've moved away to an assisted living perhaps, or a nursing home, and maybe they don't have access to that spiritual part of their life any longer. And getting involved into something new is difficult for them. Family, of course, is a psychosocial element of the aging process. We hear so much about the kids growing up and moving off and having families of their own. They're not here. They don't live. They don't stay in their home. They don't stay in their communities anymore. They go to college. They move off. Especially the aging population that I'm referring to right now, that is growing. Their children are the ones that went to college. Their children are the ones that moved away. They don't want to be in the hometown anymore, so they moved away, and they only see mom or dad or grandma or grandpa at holidays. So distance is an issue. They're busy, they're working. It's, most of these individuals are mom and dad or husband and wife are both having to work to make ends meet in today's world. And to find that work and life balance for those individuals to be able to visit or be involved in their parents or, an aging person that is in their life is very difficult to do, because there's so much going on with that particular generation. So definitely something to consider there when you're working with the aging population. So what is ageism? So we've all heard of the isms, and age is no different. Age has an ism, and it's certainly there. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it or know someone that has experienced it, but it is important to understand what it is and to understand the discrimination and the prejudice of an aging individual, because of a couple of things that I'm going to share with you here in just a moment. But to define what ageism is a prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of a person's age. I had the opportunity to visit another country in April of last year. I went to Korea, and I was there for 8 days. And it was very interesting for me to see a different culture. And the one thing that I noticed was that the individuals that were higher up in age just seemed to really, it was very different there. They really just seemed to be, what I observed, seemed to be ignored or not paid attention to. And my aunt, who is Korean, did tell me that what they see a lot of times is that they lose their usefulness. In different countries, being useful is what's important. So if someone gets up in age and their physical ability prevents them from being as useful, sometimes they're just not taken care of. And I'm not insinuating in any way that other countries don't take care of their aging population. I'm just using that as an example that, you know, there is prejudice and discrimination all over the world, and it's happening right here in our country, right here in our hometowns and our communities. So being aware of it and knowing what it looks like and what you can do about it as a social worker is what is important. So why do we need to know what ageism is? Well, number one, like I've said a few times, the aging population is growing. It's going to be you. It's going to be us. It's going to be me one day. We are aging. We're aging every day. Every day we are getting closer to that age where our cognitive, physical, and psychosocial the aspects that we talked about earlier are going to impact us. The need to learn inclusive language. So as with any ism, there are words and things that we say about individuals that are in the aging process that can be rude or can be inappropriate. And so to learn inclusive language as a social worker, it is very important. We also need to know this because of that. We need to know the aging trends. Why do we need to know the aging trends? Because we need to know how it's happening now and what's happening as people age. We need to become aware of the inequalities and the inequities. What are some of the inequalities and what are some of the inequities? And we will talk about some of those in just a little bit. And we will also talk about some solutions to that as well. Also, knowing this allows you to acknowledge your own bias and for you to change your perception. So as I was doing my research for this, I had to really check myself because I wanted to say an old person, an elderly person. I have certain words that up until doing this research to present this information, I used those words. And as I was researching, I found that it's not necessarily appropriate to say those things. So I'm trying to be very careful in my presentation. So please forgive me and bear with me because this is a learning process for me as well, which actually is one of the reasons I wanted to do this and wanted to do this presentation. And one of the reasons that I wanted to learn about it, because it's just important that we continue to grow and learn as social workers and learn about the changes that are happening and how we need to respect people, learn our own biases, and be able to change our perception, the way that we go about things when we're dealing with other individuals. And then also it's important to know because we need to know how to approach this population and how to handle it correctly and how, again, to check our biases and our perceptions so that we can be the best social worker possible for this population if we're going to work with them. And even though we may not work with them directly, they're in our lives. They're in our lives, and we may not see them in our agencies or our hospitals or facilities. They're in our lives everywhere, every day. And that's a very, very good place to begin with changing your perception and changing the way that you word when describing someone that is aging, how you're speaking to them, how you're interacting with them, and what your perception of them is. Because it's going to be you one day. It's going to be me one day. It'll be all of us one day. Because the one thing that we know for sure is that we are aging. So I mentioned age-inclusive language, and this was very impactful to me. And I appreciate what I learned through this and doing the research. It's changing me. I'm not going to say it's changed because that's a final word, but I'm growing and I'm learning and I'm changing. And that's why I would love for each of you to be able to do as well, as to grow and to learn and to change by learning. all of these things. So I've just given a few examples here, but the Gerontological Society of America in 2022 has been working to change the way we speak and think about our aging population, because evidence suggests that biased language evokes negative stereotypes about older people. So, what is the negative language? Well, let's look at some of that. Elder, elderly, senior, or aged. Now, granted, I know that the word elder is oftentimes used to describe a leader in a church. Obviously, we're not referring to them as an elder based on their age. We're referring to them based on their position in the church. And so oftentimes if these bias examples look like they really may not evoke negative stereotypes about older people, perhaps if you're I don't know, maybe where you live, it depends. So maybe ask someone that is aging, how do you prefer to be referred to? Do you prefer to be referred to as an elderly person, a senior? I mean, in my hometown, the community centers are called senior centers. And it doesn't seem to evoke any negative stereotypes about the people who attend those community centers. So I think, being able to ask the question, how would you like to be referenced? How would you like for me to address you? So the Gerontological Society of America's neutral examples: older adult, older person, or persons over 65. One article that I read said that instead of saying older person or old man or old woman, that you say a 92-year-old. Like, just call someone as what their age is. That would be a neutral example. So to say, oh, Tiffany is a 51-year-old woman or a 51-year-old, that would be something that might be appropriate. And I have actually included here a website for you to look at this from the Gerontological Society of America. This website here, if you want to screenshot that or write it down, this right here is a best practice guideline to help stop age biases in writing and in speech. So it actually gives you a list of terms and ways that you can address someone that is aging. So I'll just pause that there for just a moment and allow you to write that down or screenshot it so that you can take a peek at that. It was really a lot to put into a slide, so I didn't want to do that. Just wanted to really give you just a general brief overview of what some of these biased and neutral examples were. So as we all know, as social workers, we have a very, very strict, very big code of ethics, and this is an ethical thing for me. So, the code of ethics addresses inclusivity, and this applies to working with the aging population. And the best way to maintain this and to remain inclusive and to remain ethical when working with this population is to educate ourselves on how we speak and how we write. We want to be able to ethically and respectfully address aging individuals. So again, using that website as a best practice guideline and as something to give you some terms that you can use so that when you're addressing this population, speaking to them, talking about them, or writing about them, this is very helpful. I wanted to include this tidbit of information because I found it cute. I found it nice, and I appreciated it. So aging as a metaphor is actually the title of this particular article that I found by Susan Jeffers, and she wrote it this year. And what she says is that she recognizes aging as a normal process that happens to everyone. And she created a new age category and she called it timeless. She acknowledges that individuals who are older adults are full of life and full of experience. Jeffers associates experience and age with having money in the bank, like fine wine or an expensive liquor. Now, I don't know about you, and as I said earlier, we are all aging. It is a normal process, and to be able to normalize it and to be able to call something timeless or full of life and full of experience is a very beautiful way of saying things. Now, obviously, some people may take offense to being saying, oh, well, you're like having money in the bank, or you're like a fine wine, aged like a fine wine. Some people may find that offensive. And again, I think as social workers, I think discussing with our clients or individuals that we encounter on what they prefer, what they're comfortable with, and what you're comfortable with is a very good conversation to have with someone that is aging. So, like I said, I just wanted to look this up. Susan Jeffers, Aging as a Metaphor. If you want to read the whole article, my bibliography will actually have it at the end there. Aging trends and perceptions. Of course, we can't do a presentation without giving you some statistics and trends and things that we're seeing. So here we go. Americans 65 and older are projected to increase to 82 million in 2050. Now that's about 25 years from now, 24 and a half years from now. We're in 2024, so going to increase to 82 million. That's a lot. Why is it going to increase to 82 million? It's going to increase to 82 million because the life expectancy is growing. And in some research that I saw, the population that should be having children right now, they're not having children. They're not having children as frequently as other generations have in the past. So we're going to have a lot of individuals that are aging, and that might likely be one of the biggest clientele that we come in contact with as social workers. The U.S. population is older today than it has ever been. The older population is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse, meaning that not only just white people are living longer, it means that people of color are living longer. People from different countries are living longer. We're seeing all types of medical things happening that are allowing people to live longer, not just in the United States, not just with white individuals, but with individuals across every racial and ethnic background. Education levels are increasing among people over the age of 65. Why? Because this is possibly when everybody started talking about, you need to go to college, you need to go to college. So those individuals, they went to college to be the first to graduate from their family, from a college. It's that generation. That's when people really started going off to college. Older adults are working longer. Why are older adults working longer? Does anyone want to take a guess? No, I'm not going to take a guess, but I'm going to just throw something out there. They're working longer because it's costing more to live now. And our retirement and Social Security and things are not going to allow people who retire the ability to live the lifestyle that they're used to living. So definitely something to keep in mind there. More older adults can meet their daily care needs. Why do we think that is? Just ponder that for just a moment and think maybe why people are able to care for their needs more. I think it's because medicine and people are taking better care of themselves. They're working longer, they're staying active longer, they're making changes in their lifestyle. There's so much information out there right now that, when people hear it on the news. You know, we're taking our vitamins, we're exercising more, we're getting out, we're socializing more, we're doing brain exercises. The cognitive, the physical, and the psychosocial things that we discussed earlier, we're starting to take better care of ourselves and make sure that those things don't happen. We're putting things in place. The poverty rate for Americans ages 65 and older has dropped sharply. More older adults are divorced. We're getting to some of the trends now in the perceptions, but more older adults are divorced now. More older women are living alone, and Social Security and Medicare expenditures will increase. So definitely something to think about when you're dealing with this population, when you're dealing with this clientele. If you work with these individuals, these are things that you need to know. Don't just automatically assume that they're not able to take care of themselves. Don't automatically assume that they've been married for 60 or 70 years. Don't automatically assume that because they are a certain age that they aren't living alone and taking care of their needs, or that they're no longer working. We need to ask these questions. We need to open up the lines of communication. Types of aging. I want you to look at this picture, this video. I think it's amazing. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us. So the types of aging, there are 5 types of aging: chronological aging, biological aging, appearance aging, and psychological aging, and social aging. First, we will talk about chronological aging. So chronological aging is the number of years from birth to this current date. So if you go to the day that you were born up until this day, that's going to be your current age in years, months, and days, and etc. You can even go into hours and minutes and seconds and all of that. But this is the most common method that we all use to determine age. You know, sometimes we want to look at a person and guess their age. And maybe some of us are good at it, some of us are not. But this is the most common method to determine age. You know, every application, every form that we fill out when we go to the doctor, we're putting our chronological age, we're putting that date on there. Biological aging. Now, this is where some of those inefficiencies and physical changes that we talked about earlier come from. So biological aging is the progressive decline in physiological ability of a person that occurs over time. The core principle is that aging is a result of damage to cells and other parts of the body. It is also known as physiological or functional age. So physiological or functional age, like I may be 50 years old, but my functional age may put me at 70. I may have a health condition that makes my biological body, my physical body, unable to function as an average 51-year-old person. And the core principle here being that is a result of damage to the cells and the other parts of the body. And again, this is referencing back to, like I said earlier, to a car. You drive a car, you use a car, the steering wheel gets worn out, the seat's going to get worn out, that you're going to have to change the tires, you're going to have to change the oil in it, and even changing the tires and changing the oil and the belts and all of the things inside. Despite taking care of them and making sure you're doing all of the things right, they do still tend to wear out. So that is our biological age. Thanks to medicine, this is improving, and I think this has a lot to do with why people are living older. Appearance aging. Now, I think this one pretty much speaks for itself. So these are the appearance changes that we see in the face and the neck, and even arms and stature, our posture, our eyelids, you know, our jowls, all the different things that gravity starts pulling on as we get older. So our skin becomes flabby, drooping eyelids, drooping skin, loss of muscular tone. We talked about the atrophy of muscles and the change in bones as we get older, and then the thinning skin. Like we talked about, you know, bumping, you know, and getting what they call a skin tear, you know, where you just barely hit something and your skin just kind of pulls up, and the next thing you know, you're bleeding. Or maybe if the skin didn't tear right then, maybe you've got one of those, you've seen individuals that are aging have lots of purple marks on their skin. It's just a normal part of a parent's aging. Psychological aging. And I have misspelled that word twice in this presentation. I do know how to spell, I promise. This refers to how old a person feels, acts, and behaves. So maturity indicates an age that exceeds chronological age. Now, I like to think about children when I'm talking about psychological aging. When I think about children, I think about my daughter. And my daughter, she was an only child and the only grandchild. And so often she was around individuals who were much older than she was. So when she was a child, she acted older than she really was. Her maturity level, her language, her ability to speak and interact with people was different than other children that weren't raised the way that she was. So her maturity indicates age that exceeds the chronological age. So even though she was like 5 years old, she acted like she was 7, 8, 9 years old. And that's the way that she behaved. That's the way that she acted. And then the psychological aging, referring to how a person feels. My mother often says this to me. She says, I know how old I am. My mind does, I don't, in my mind, I don't think I'm 70 something years old. And in my mind, I think I can go and do XYZ, but my body certainly tells me differently. I hear her say that often, and she'll have, you know, and it'll usually be in a conversation that she's having with someone that's you know, close to age as she is. And I can resonate with that. I know exactly what that means, because I mean, just 10 years ago, I was able to do things that I'm not able to do any longer at 51. So all of that changes with time. And as I said, it's going to happen to all of us. Social aging. This refers to how society influences the meanings and experiences of aging. It's also the expectations and assumptions of others about what should or should not be at a certain age. So society imposes things on us. As a woman, society, and being from the South, we're expected to be seen, not heard. Just throwing out some old examples. But these are some things that happen. The assumptions or the expectations of the way that, you know, people that are older in age should act or behave. And like what do we see on TV? Do we see the little grandma that's on Tweety Bird? Is that the way that we expect, you know, grandmothers or people that are up in age to act? And how much of an influence does this have on someone that is aging? So if they're seeing this on TV, like as young girls, we saw Barbie, or we saw, you know, models, and we thought that was the way that we were supposed to look. So that influenced us and how we thought we needed to behave or look. That's happening with the elderly population as well. A practical approach to aging. So the United Nations General Assembly declared 2021, so 3 years ago, to 2030, 6 years from now, the decade of healthy aging. And the World Health Organization was tasked with overseeing its implementation. And the way that the World Health Organization was tasked is going to handle this Decade of Healthy Aging their goal is to reduce health inequities and improve the lives of older people. They are taking a collective action to make changes in 4 areas of age and ageism. So the World Health Organization, wants to change how we think about age and ageism or aging, how we feel about age and aging, and how we act about age and aging. So some of those words that we were talking about earlier that were biased or neutral, important to consider. They are wanting to develop communities that foster older individuals' abilities. So they're encouraging some more of these things to happen. I know that there's a few in my community where you have to be a certain age to live there, and the apartments and the surrounding, all the things in that apartment complex are geared towards individuals of a certain age. Delivering person-centered integrated care and primary care services. So we want to, as person-centered, as social workers, that's something we should really focus on, person-centered, putting them first, listening to them, unconditional positive regard, listening and nodding and allowing them to talk about, to express themselves, to ask questions, to be really involved, and to be able to do that in any counseling or primary care, any type of health care. And then also providing access to those in need, quaternary care, meaning we want to be able to get all areas of an individual that is aging, all 4 areas of an individual that are aging, the physical, the mental, the social, all of those areas. We want to be able to tap into all of those and be able to provide them with what they need. So the World Health Organization is tasked with this and implementing the Decade of Healthy Aging. But how can we as social workers play a part in that? How are we going to take a practical approach to aging, and what are we going to do? What role are we going to play? What changes are we going to make as social workers so that we can help the aging population as they're aging? I want to thank you so much for joining me in this presentation. I hope that it has been beneficial to you. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I am sure that there will be some contact information for you to be able to contact me or to ask questions. Please encourage your friends, refer your friends to watch this if it's something that you feel like needs to be shared. I feel like that is something that we all need to be more aware of and to learn more about. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining, and until next time.
I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post-test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.